When Super Saiyan first appeared on the pages of the Dragon Ball Z manga on March 19th, 1991, it was something truly special, memorable, and amazing. Not to mention cool. It really made Goku feel special, and felt like a direct culmination of his arc in Z at the time. At the time, nobody, including Toriyama, thought that it would start a trend of transformations within and even outside the series. It was just a means of convenience for Toriyama at the time, but yeah, it rocked the world of Dragon Ball. Until we got another Super Saiyan, then another, and then another, and another. Nowadays, it seems kind of natural that every Saiyan, theoretically, could have Super Saiyan. It's just a matter of time, but in most cases, the main obstacle is something to do with their attitude. While today this iconic transformation is laughably weak when compared to stuff that we had in later episodes of Z, GT, Super, on the scale of a standard citizen of the Dragon Ball galaxy, this is a huge deal still. Remember when Vegeta was already a planet-busting threat when we first met him, so from the perspective of a normie, it's practically godlike Super Saiyan. And speaking of gods, it didn't take the Saiyans that long to overtake the Supreme Kai of Universe 7, and that is the problem for the universe. And in a way, that might be the sole reason why Super Saiyan was so rare. Confused? Well, let's start at the beginning. Because, most likely accidentally, Dragon Ball has set a certain pattern that, at the end of the day, reveals the great equalizer of its world. We know that the universe has some very hard and fast laws, and we do see them in action when Beerus from the Dragon Ball Super manga is directly helping mortals against Moro. And because Beerus, an angel in training, actively helps and defends mortals, he gets erased. Sure, the Grand Priest is able to reconstitute him later as a mortal, but still, angelic powers and direct intervention are big no-nos. So is the case with a limited intervention by the Kaioshins. The gods of destruction seem to have more of a free hand in carrying out their duties, but at the same time, they used to be mortals as well. Also, that whole lifelink situation between the GOD and the Supreme Kai forces them to work together, and it kind of encourages the destroyer part, usually the stronger of the two, to protect his linked partner. Beerus has a really hard job, no wonder why he needs so many naps. These are the biggest universal rules that we know of in the Dragon world, and they mostly are connected to divine beings, because they do run roughshod and they are kind of incompetent. They really do need some kind of guidance. I don't really see that many laws against mortals, with the exception of maybe don't time travel, which in hindsight is kind of obvious, because it just leaves us with a big headache. But nature finds other ways. Imagine now if the Saiyans were able to access Super Saiyan as a society, as if it were a normal thing. They would practically rule the universe. End of. Who would have stopped them? Who would measure up to them? Deborah? Maybe at some point the Gero family would have created androids that would have been powerful enough, but that would still take some time. Sure, there might be someone stronger than 1 or 2 Super Saiyans, but an entire army of Super Saiyans? A Super Saiyan squadron? And if they had access to that, there is a huge chance that some of them would experiment with going even further beyond. You really think that Super Saiyans would just sit pretty at Super Saiyan? No, 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 no. They'd be striving to find out more powers. Look what we saw with Goku and Vegeta. An entire army, they'd be up to Super Saiyan 2 in no time. But to be fair, they might be so proud that they consider themselves to be the absolute pinnacle, so why bother? In other words, they might do a Frieza. It could go either way. Like, we know that Frieza and Cold are a special mutated case of their original species. We don't even know if King Cold actually purged his original species and he's the only one left. But it is so perfectly hysterical that the Emperor of the Universe did not know about his capability to transform further, because before meeting Goku, he really didn't need to check. Would Saiyans fall into the same pitfall? Some, for sure. But there is also the case of the legendary Super Saiyans of legend, who are a curiosity of their own, and are kind of what Frieza and Cold were to their species. Hey, maybe that's why good old Freezy Pops is so fascinated by the likes of this guy. Maybe he sees a sense of weird, twisted kinship to this power and Broly? Who knows? But aside from these two species, what are the 2 other broken ones within the Dragon Ball universe that we know of? Namekians and Cereallians for various reasons. Now, I don't know if Piccolo was the first of his kind to unlock the orange transformation. The movie presents it as if that wasn't the case, as if it was something ancient that Piccolo's now acquired. Nor do I believe Granola was the first one to learn the power of two eyes, but the two of them, specifically, incredibly broken. Now, is there something that ties the Namekians, Saiyans, Cereallians, them together? Aside from their major roles in the Granola saga that nobody really cares about? Oh yeah, all three of these races are nearing extinction after something catastrophic happened to their race. True, the Namekians might have the most luck, but still, when compared to the snippets of what we know about them from the past, it's still a bit of a shadow and an enigma of what they used to be. Now, of course, the proper answer is that this is all plot convenience, but we're not here today for that, no. We're here for some good old fun theory crafting. And we do think that the reason why bad things keep happening to such broken races is intentional within the universe itself. It's a very cruel mistress. It's how Universe 7 keeps itself from breaking apart, honestly. An unspoken law of the cosmos. You can add the Tuffles to the mix too, because if we look at GT, their parasites are truly terrifying. As we talked about in this video here, we're actually sort of debating whether the Tuffles are even crueler than the Saiyans. We're uncertain about the species of the Heaters because we don't have enough data about it. This, ironically, might be the reason why Universe 7 was so low when it came to its mortal level, because nobody knows a thing about the particular threats within its own universe. It's not because of general incompetence, it's simply because if all of these civilizations lived up to their full potential, they would have had the potential to tear the multiverse apart. Now, Universe 6 is interesting because they were given the secret to the Super Saiyan, which may spell doom for them. Okay, I want to be clear. I do not want to suggest that the Grand Priest or any other entity is behind all of this. Those extinction level events happened for various reasons throughout the whole of history. But what I do believe is that the way that the Great Equalizer works is more akin to something between a security system and the laws of physics. It doesn't have a conscious intention behind it, it just is. It moves the events towards a resolution where mortals will not destroy their own universe from the inside. If you just allowed them to run roughshod over everything, grow unchecked, it would end the dragon world much sooner. Maybe that's why the gods of destruction are a thing in the first place. Destruction of planet Vegeta. Okay, this is pretty speculative on our part, and it does invoke many other questions for various reasons, but maybe the gods of destructions are like kind of loosening the faucet in a way. One of the bigger ones is about this whole blasted mortal level in the first place. We've been wondering in the past whether this was just some kind of dud gimmick or maybe a legit thing. For sure, it doesn't make sense in the manga unless Zeno and the Grand Priest are making a show for the Xenoguards and pranking them. It isn't unlike them to do so. But then again, this seems like an awful lot of effort, and as we've learned time and time again, it does not have to be connected to the power level of combatants in said universe. Goku and his friends are clearly stronger than some of the higher rated participants. Rather, civilization level, I suppose. Should we assume that a higher mortal level also means that it doesn't have beings that could use deadly powers against the universe? Perhaps. Okay, now we should discuss one of our favorite characters here. Though, let's be honest, he's more of a living deus ex machina at this point. The Grand Priest. The GP's motivations are rather interesting, as there are some differences between the anime and the manga versions, but they made sure to keep some of his key traits cohesive between the different iterations of media. He seems to be consistently cheering for the mortals. That's very clear. He enjoys seeing them achieve great things and teaching the gods a lesson or two. To destroyers and Kais, he can be a little mischievous, but never outright hostile. He seems to be the real brains behind the Omni King. What is his endgame? We don't know. There was some speculation on him being a bad guy when the Tournament of Power started, but I don't think that is something that is going to be a thing now, or if it was even ever intended. When Dragon Ball Super was destined to end back in January, you could definitely tell that the ending of the Tournament of Power was rushed, and that there might have been some other subplot going on had it continued for 10 or 15 episodes, but it obviously had to be cut. We'll never know the truth. But yeah, the Grand Priest being mysterious, it's in his job description. We also know that he can revert the will of the universe, or at least be capable of mending some of the more broken and drastic effects of it, as we saw with the likes of Beerus. On one hand, he represents the rules, but on the other, he does appreciate the creative application of those rules. People bending them, he seemed not to mind that a second Omni King just popped into existence, was brought into his timeline. A second Omni King didn't cause the universe to go crazy, so he's like, alright, Beerus fighting for mortals seemed like a bigger offense in a way. Also, speaking of that, we never really thought about this at the time, but we basically had confirmation that there are laws of the universe that even the Omni King isn't free of. He has some checks and balances. What do we mean? Time. The whole existence of the second Zeno means that he is dependent on time, not the other way around. Which is interesting because a lot of deities in media are not bound by the rules of time and space. Now, is the Grand Priest like that as well? We kind of know that he's capable of divination, but does it go beyond just one timeline? It's kind of hard to say. If he's still unable to move freely through time without time rings and whatnot, that just shows how powerful a force time is within the Dragon Ball universe. Yeah, he can probably do what Whis did in Resurrection F, but I wonder if his rewind is stronger. Like maybe just for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or indefinite. But looking at the actions alone, you can maybe think that the GP doesn't always agree with the will of the universe. What is his vision of how it should look? Nobody knows. But it certainly seems like he would side with the mortals if it came to it. To return to the thought about Jiro, Vomi, and Hedo, and humanity overall, whilst Western media loves to show humanity as these special beings on the scale of the entire galaxy, in Dragon Ball though, we're kind of just meh. There are some outstanding individuals, of course, but it seems that in terms of power, we're very much like the Tuffles, with our creations outgrowing us. This is notable with Jiro's bloodline, as well as Dr. Breeze's and his descendants. Again, Cell was already crazy strong, as he'd be able to take on Shin quite handily, which is bad for Universe 7, and should alert any divine being watching this space. If you think about it, some Supreme Kais are the Achilles heels of their destroyers. I mean, at least Shin is. Sorry, buddy. I'm not even going to talk about how broken 17, 18, the Gammas, and Cell Max are. This might put humanity on the radar for the Great Equalizer. Maybe not. If it's just these two families, which are keeping their adventures to themselves, then fine, the universe will look the other way. Though if Magenta had had Hedo build an entire army of Cell Maxes, oh boy. Similarly, Goichi and his OG soldiers with the poor forgotten 7-3 can also potentially be problematic. It can steal power from an angel. I'm aware that it's just a trainee angel, but still, we know how Beerus ended up. And in hindsight, we know how Moro ended up. So he was not able to handle it himself. He's one of the greatest wizards in history. You see where we're going, right? Of course, we're not trying to tell you that Toriyama created all of these elaborate laws of the universe intentionally. No, he just lucked into it. Some of these events were simply examples of plot convenience that came about through his improvisation or writing, as well as additional drama. But the more things you add, the more interconnected they become. And with Super focusing on the gods and how they operate and how incompetent they are, I would not be surprised if that would be spelled out loudly in the series at some point, instead of just being a little bit subtle. It already kinda happened through Zamasu, who was the poster child of mortals getting too strong, while most of the gods were in awe over Goku getting Ultra Instinct for the first time. Angels acting like that are obvious because they understand how much work it takes to get there. So at the end of the day, it seems like Dragon Ball kind of became a franchise of gods and mortals pushing against the universe. Whilst the universe tries to protect itself, it often does so at the cost of individual lives. On the other hand, the franchise has many ridiculously strong characters that would be capable of doing irreversible damage to existence itself, if not contained. And the funny thing is that the villains who seem to have taken the universe's side in that conflict are ultimately the thing that results in its entire timeline being erased. Tough luck, Zamasu. Go Team Mortals! I don't want to give too much credit to Super in terms of the themes and questions that it tries to pose. Dragon Ball is at its best when it's simple and the motivations are easy to understand. It doesn't mean that it can't have depth. It just means that this depth is easily presentable to the audience instead of trying to be cryptic. Super seems to be throwing us a question. Do mortals really need gods? Whilst at the same time, the more valid parts of Zamasu's thought process, there weren't many, trust us, maybe sometimes echo in our heads. Should mortals be allowed to reach certain levels of power? It's fine when our buddy Goku does it, because he's an anomaly. But can we say the same about the likes of Frieza, who's actually doing the same thing? It's hard to say, but it's pretty hilarious that, if you think long and hard enough, such a stakeless universe as the world of Dragon Ball suddenly seems like it is constantly on the brink of elimination and destruction, and the villains might be only part of the problem. For sure, the Triple T didn't intend for us to think about this so heavily. It's like the end of the Goku Black arc. Oh, don't focus on that existential dread. Look at the funny little Omni Kings. Sorry guys, we're Westerners. Thinking doom and gloom is something that we do. Constantly.